Are you familiar with FBI Special Agents Kyle Seraphin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name. Familiar with the name. Familiar with the name.
Let's bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's the FBI whistleblower who helped expose government censorship of our First Amendment rights.
Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public. And we're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
He's the host of something that strangely is called the Kyle Seraphin Show.
Kyle Seraphin, I can't thank you enough for speaking out. I knew you guys were out there, and I knew it was just a matter of time, but you got a lot of guts putting your face and your name to this. You're doing a service on behalf of the American people, and from the bottom of my cracked and broken heart sometimes, thank you very much.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Tuesday. It is February the 4th, and I'm very happy to have you along for this little journey we're going to go on today. We're going to be talking about USAID because everybody is talking about USAID throughout all of the news media coverage I'm looking at, except these people at CNN. They're really worried about gay Canadians, which, by the way, it was always there. It was right out in front of you. Canadians. They're not snow Mexicans. They're something else. We're going to get there in just a second. Kind of an interesting situation. You're seeing a squawk and a squeal from the folks that are supporting the deep state. The people who are kind of starting to say the quiet part out loud. It's really coming out in response to foreign aid being shut down. We're going to talk a little bit about the history of it, where it came from, why I think this is really problematic. There are some arguments in favor of keeping things like USAID going, but it certainly needs some accountability. And there's plenty of the wrong people that are defending it. So I think that's the most interesting piece. We got a couple other things coming up this week. In theory, we'll have an RFK confirmation, maybe a Tulsi Gabbard confirmation hearing, maybe a Kash Patel. Like, all the hearings have gone on, so the votes may be coming on. And we just had Pam Bondi get out of cloture the other day, or cloture, whatever the hell they call that. So this long process of putting people through committees and then putting up for a vote still ongoing. So we still don't have any of the people that we really want to see to change the face of the way this government is working. And honestly, they should be arguing in favor of it. I'm going to tell you why, because the chaos that's happening at the FBI is actually government-wide. There's a sort of like a widespread, oh God, dare we say the word insurrection? There's certainly an uprising within government employees, and USAID is just a piece of it. Before we get into the news cycle and some of the commentary that's going to be there, I want to start with a new sponsor, and so I will give them a little bit extra time right now. It's a really neat sponsor. If you guys know anything about me, yes, there are some things you got to pay for. You got to have cell phone service. You got to have internet service. You got to have various things in your life that you have to do. Those are kind of the adult things you do. But gear, that's where I'm most excited. I'm going to show you. This is a Faraday bag from a company called Silent. I put my phone in there. You guys don't know this, but I've been doing this for a little while now. When we start the show, so the damn thing doesn't ring while we're working, I'm going to show you a little bit of background footage, and we're going to talk about a company called Silent and the danger of a thing called ubiquitous technical surveillance, which is something that I will do an entire program on. I promise you. If you're not following me over on Locals, it's kyleseraphin.com. Check that out, because I'm going to actually give you guys a behind the scenes where we went through a SHOT Show and we walked through the booth. You're going to see some B-roll footage of that right now. You can go to their website. It is slnt.com/Kyle. SLNT. It's silent without any of the vowels. Okay? Between government, big tech, corporate America, and criminals, your privacy is constantly on the verge of compromise 24/7. There is no other option. You have to protect yourself, and you can do that with a product from Silent. Again, SLNT. They make a Faraday product that blocks all incoming and outgoing RF signals. It's going to make your devices invisible and safe from the outside world. It also makes you digitally invisible. All right. From their backpacks to their phone sleeves, even pants that they can make right now that have patented pockets that are signal blocking technology for your cell phone, for your mobile device. They will give you peace of mind that your data is not going to end up in the wrong hands. You simply place your device inside of it, close it, and that's it. You're safeguarded from unauthorized access. Go silent today by going to slnt.com/KYLE. You'll save 15%. These are not the least expensive things in the market, but they are very effective. I've used the least expensive and they all suck and they all fail. We used to test them, okay? You're going to stay ahead what's coming your way. You're going to secure your privacy, and you're also going to secure your devices by going to slnt.com/Kyle. Again, 15% off, free shipping with qualified orders, slnt.com/Kyle. I will give you guys a full look at why I'm excited about this, but I did a leak test on their product, which meant that I actually drove it from Dallas to Austin and exposed it to various different angles and various different positions across a couple hundred miles worth of driving, or 150, 200 miles of driving. And they passed our leak test, which almost all commercial Faraday bags used to fail when I was in the FBI. So check them out. We're going to get right into the news right now, but excited to welcome them aboard. Okay, as promised, we're going to get into Canadians first. Why? Because other people are starting to use my terminology of snow Mexicans. I've seen it. Some of you are sharing with me. They've made memes about it. That's good. Let it catch on. There are different types of people that live up in America's attic, also known as Canada. Some of them are snow Mexicans. Some of them are Canadians. And this was the opening story. This is why I'm going to have to find a new source. I'm actually getting more and more turned on to go to ABC to start off my day. They're actually fair and reasonable-ish comparatively. This was one of the lead stories on CNN's website, which makes me laugh. Am I now a walking target? The Canadians who are boycotting travel to the United States because of Donald Trump. Now, I don't know why they have these pictures. There's actually 3 pictures. I had to cut one of them out. It's 2 women and a man, but the story is about a gay couple. The guy on the left, the guy who's closest to me wearing the sunglasses. His name is Jason Dale. He started planning a family vacation to Tennessee. He started planning it a year ago. Do you know who plans family vacations a year out? Apparently, women and gay men. Real men do not have time to plan vacations a year out. I've had people invite me like, hey, will you come speak at our conference? It's next year. And I'm like, I don't even know what state I'm going to live in next year. I cannot figure out how on earth that would work. In any case, this Canadian said that it was going to be his family's last hurrah and a send-off before his oldest son, who turned 18, leaves the family nest. They were going to go with 2 other families, and this guy, Jason Dale, and his husband. I'm going to put that in air quotes because right now, I don't believe that anymore. I haven't believed it from the beginning. I just don't like it. I don't like calling men who are married to men because I don't believe that they're actually married, just because I have this weird idea. We're doing rollbacks right now under the new Donald Trump era. The golden age also involves rolling back 16 years of craziness. Oberfeld should go as well. It's not that I don't think that gay people should be happy. I think they should. And if they want to spend their life with another man or another woman, like, knock themselves out. But you're not married. It's not the same thing. I also don't think the government should be involved in any tax incentives for people that are married. So, like, I am consistent, like in a sort of a libertarian sort of way. Just get the hell out. Stay out of this. Anyway, they were going to go to Tennessee, apparently, and go check out the Great Smoky Mountains. They mapped out their route, and they had the rest stop. This is very gay stuff. They booked their resort, and it was all set up. They'd been wanting to make this trip since the kids were little. They'd done it before, and now they were going to do a recreation of this trip. And the Canadians decided that their dollar is garbage and Donald Trump is scary, and so they are not going to go there. This is considered news. And the most interesting thing for me, I don't know why this was interesting, but it was behind a paywall, people. That story was for subscribers only. And that means there's, like, in theory, I don't think it's much of a market, but there's some kind of a market that CNN has tapped into where people want to read the story of Canadians who want to come to the United States but now feel very, very bad. This is like a shame story, like shame on you Americans. The gay Canadians can't come here. It's a weird way to waste your time. But I think it's indicative of a lot of the information that the left has consumed, that they think that is relevant. They also think that the purpose of the American federal government is to throw money at people that are not American. Maybe that's why you would care about gay Canadians. There you are again. There's another picture of them. By the way, if you submit a photo like this to a national news service, let me describe this for my listeners that are just not seeing this. If you have the phone in your pocket and or you are not watching the video, you're actually missing out on something fairly substantial. There's a chubby man dressed in a woman's tank top in the middle. There are about 8 kids on either side, and then like 1 or 2 grown males that are standing in the background that look like regular dudes, but they have like floppy Gilligan's hats on and kind of silly. They're standing in front of the ball at Epcot Center in Florida, and they are wearing various rainbow colored things. Maybe there's just one rainbow thing, but it's very prominent. It's like a rainbow heart. And it looks crazy gay to me, and it looks obnoxious. It looks like the worst people that are going to go visit Florida. It's the people that Floridians are like, ugh, we have to tolerate these people because they bring tourist dollars, but nobody wants them there. And there's one kid on the far left-hand side who's absolutely miserable. He looks like a regular kid. He's wearing a regular like skateboarding t-shirt. He's wearing like some jean, or what do you call those things? Like gym shorts. He's got skinny little legs. He's just a poor kid who's just going, F my life. I cannot believe that I have to hang out with these people, that I got brought here by a bunch of Canadians. In any case. Okay, so that's the story. All right. Poor things. Anyway, it was always right out there. I got a message from a producer of a very large, like one of the largest podcasts in America, reaching out and letting me know that he spit his coffee out, learning that it was always there. Canadians. Now you guys have it as well. Go forth and conquer. Share it on all the places that you need to. Let's move into real some news. So this is ABC. As I said, ABC is starting to sound actually useful. They're the most fair and reasonable, but this is a pretty funny little interview. This man that you're seeing on the screen is a former USAID, also known as USAID official, who calls its closure a, quote, extinction level event for the global aid sector, end quote. That sounds really, really troubling if you support things like global aid and the global aid sector. I mean, I've been reflecting on this just a little bit. And all of these people who are coming out of the woodwork to talk about how bad it would be if the American government suddenly stopped funding everything around the globe. You know, like the global priorities were always the most important piece. All it's made me do is think Alex Jones is not that crazy for screaming about the globalists nonstop. He might be a little bit wild for screaming about dimensional vampires coming after your children in another dimension. But the globalist thing, it's a terminal position. It's the reason why a Trump doctrine, sort of a resurrection of the Monroe Doctrine, is not wrong. We've been spending money all over the globe. We've been basically subjugating ourselves to the people that we have basically conquered. The United States has an empire, but it's an empire of feeling ashamed of having an empire. And it's a strange place to exist. In any case, ABC News interviewed this guy. His name was Jeremy. Oh, who knows what this name's going to be. There's two Y's and a K in it that don't make any sense, and 4 consonants in a row. But it's like Condike. We'll call him Connie Dyke. He's the president of the Refugees International. That doesn't sound like a thing that I want to support at all, unless you're going to keep them overseas. It turns out a lot of these people keep coming over here. So hard pass. Thank you so much. He's the former lead of USAID. And that stands for the United States Agency for International Development. It's funny. I've got a little clip explaining this, maybe for like the primer, for those of you who have never heard of this organization, but you're now seeing it everywhere and you're wondering, like, oh, who could talk about this? Let's go to Mike Benz. Mike Benz was working at the State Department for a little while. He's become an expert on sort of global tyranny in the internet space, and he's absolutely brilliant. There's no question about that. He's clearly slanted toward the sides that we're going to more or less agree on. He went on Joe Rogan and laid out this primer. This is him explaining that even using the name and the acronym USAID is sort of a trick to your brain because it has the word aid. But in reality, what it stands for is Agency for International Development. And that is not the same thing as aid, it turns out. It's a proxy to get U.S. State Department interests projected around the globe, which turns out to be sort of this deep state thing. If you've listened to this program before, you know that everybody at the State Department that focuses on a specific country tends to come from that country. In other words, the Ukraine desk at the State Department will have a bunch of native-born Ukrainians. They speak the language, they understand the culture, and in theory, they're American citizens that are loyal to the U.S., but we've got to have some questions about it because they also have family ties and kind of a conflict of interest that pulls them in the direction of the place that they are representing. They should be representing only U.S. interests. The only people I really want to see at the State Department, and I know this is kind of like, it's going to be really hard to do, it may be even impossible, but I'd like to see U.S.-born people that have no connection to a foreign area, that have maybe traveled there and picked up native fluency. And there are people that did that. Like, for example, my wife speaks fluent Italian, and at least she did much better when she lived there. But she's an American. She has American sympathies. She has American family. She doesn't have any direct lineage that we can go out there and hang up and call and go visit in Italy. And so people like that would be better to represent U.S. interests to Italy than people who are like, let's say, first generation Italians where their grandparents are still living in Italy. It's kind of a danger that we deal with. So here's Mike Benz kind of breaking down what it is. What is USAID? And this is a biased opinion because there are plenty of people that actually see some value in this. We're going to give them an opportunity to talk about it as well. And for those of you who are worried, it will be the worst people. So it does kind of slant my opinion as on the same page.
State Department, USAID, and the National Endowment for Democracy. Now USAID is, a very notorious. It's sort of a switch player. There's no aid in USAID, by the way. That's your brain is being tricked when you see the phrase USAID. It's not an aid organization. The aid in USAID stands for U.S. Agency for International Development. It is developing internationally around the world all of the institutions that the State Department needs to use. So when they are capacity building activist groups in a foreign country, that's because the State Department wants those activists there. Now, USAID, for the first time in its history, it was created in the early 1960s by JFK, 1961. It was created because you had all of this intelligence, statecraft, and military support and logistical aid that was tripping over itself, basically. The military would be funding, would be running aid to certain groups in the region. The State Department would be running aid to certain groups in the region. The intelligence community would, and there was no sort of central coordinator of those capacity building operations. So USAID, by the way, is a $50 billion budget.
So we'll get more into it a little bit more, and I'm going to let people say it in their own words. We're going to talk about some of the ridiculous spending that is out there, and I don't know if these are cover stories or if this is actually what they spend their money on, but it's the line items that they've gotten approved and what goes into Congress, and that's what the what the White House is actually out there projecting. So, if you don't want any oversight with what you're doing with the money, then probably you shouldn't get the money because you still are taxpayer funded. This guy, what's his name? Coney Dick. He said the following. If he had a chance to talk to Elon Musk, he's the guy that's on the screen, then this is what he would tell him. I'm just reading from the transcript right here. I would tell Elon Musk, who is running DOGE, which is basically running a demo operation and has paused all funding for USAID. He said, look, I would tell him this: look past the stereotypes and the caricatures that you've seemingly created about what USAID is and actually talk to the people working there. Hard pass. I don't actually want to talk to the people working there. I want to look at your books, which is what's actually been going on. He said, I served in the agency twice, and some of the images that you're seeing on the screen of disaster relief and those sorts of things, I actually led and oversaw, and that is all offline right now. The people there are professionals, and they deeply care about the mission. The Fairfax County Search and Rescue, these are the people that go out after the earthquakes and save lives. What the hell does Fairfax County Search and Rescue? That was county funded. I used to pay for Fairfax County Search and Rescue. He said that's why the staff of USAID does what they do. Look, all of this stuff ends up being very, very goofy because they can't give you a straight answer about what it does. They won't give you a straight answer about what they spend the money on. And when you ask them directly, they answer a different question. This is Samantha Powers answering questions of Rand Paul. Under oath, by the way, and she tries to answer other questions. This is why we're so sketchy about it. Here is an example of a testimony before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, where a former USAID administrator is giving this like DOGE. Maybe that's why there needs to be DOGE.
Ms. Powers, did USAID fund coronavirus research in Wuhan, China?
We did not fund gain-of-function research,
That's not the question.
As you know.
The question is, did you fund coronavirus research in Wuhan, China?
Before my time, there was the PREDICT program with which you're familiar, which ended in China in 2019.
Yeah, this is a $200 million program, and the GAO has also identified that some of these grants went directly to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, where there is a suspicion that the lab leak began the pandemic. Has USAID awarded funds to the Academy of Military Medical Sciences in China?
Not to my knowledge, but I'd have to get
I think the answer is once again yes. GAO has found that there have been subawards of NIH money as probably as well as USAID money that went to the Academy of not just medical research, military medical research in China. Now, part of the unknowns here is we can't get the records to look at this. So I've been asking for months and months for records. In September of last year, I wrote Ms. Powers, USAID, a request asking for records from the PREDICT program. These are not classified. These are simply records of scientific research, and we want to read the grants to find out what they were doing and whether the research was dangerous or not.
So that was April of 2023. This is sworn testimony. And again, nothing but dodging, not trying to answer the question. He mentioned that it was going to military medical research, which is always sort of problematic. And so you wonder, like, what's going on there? You heard Mike Benz talk about it just a little bit. It is a clearinghouse for funding for foreign aid, and then also for sort of intelligence operations, State Department programs, and what they call civil affairs. Now, civil affairs has a cousin that's known as PSY operations, right? Psychological operations. And the money part of it goes along with the operations part of it, where they are trying to craft messaging. So you're in this space where you've got people who don't want to answer questions. They want to spend our money, but they don't want accountability. They're not classified programs, except it kind of leans like they might be, because we're talking about things that a lot of people think were bioweapons. A lot of people have this concern when she immediately jumps to an answer. It's this sort of the lady doth protest too much. Have you been funding this type of, a specific research on a particular type of virus? And the answer was, we have not been doing gain of function. Excuse me, ma'am. Nobody asked you about gain of function. Are you dumping dollars that actually have a headline that says coronavirus in China? Because a lot of people supposedly died for that. And if nothing else, a lot of people had their lives completely disrupted. And it seemed like it was a technique to take down a sitting U.S. president. So these questions can't be answered. It doesn't matter who asked them, by the way. It doesn't matter if it's under oath. It doesn't matter if it happens at a press conference or under a congressional hearing. These things go unanswered. Here's a reporter asking the same question. And frankly, I'm not going to dignify your insinuation. How about you do your job as a spokesperson and you give transparency to the American people? Who is funding this stuff? You are. I am. The taxpayers of the United States, and all of the borrowing that they do when they print off our money. So we're either funding it through actual taxation or we're funding it through inflation when they print money to go give it away. But either way, we're talking about $50 billion. For everybody that's upset about the FBI, myself included, what's going on over at DOJ, the FBI is an $11 billion budget for a fiscal year. Okay? Multiply that by 4.5 to 5. That's what you're dealing with sent overseas to do God knows what in 100 countries. Here's a little taste of what happens if you're a reporter and you're doing the job of a reporter, asking questions.
How much money went from USAID to the work at Wuhan and to their collaborator, Ralph Barrick, at the University of North Carolina, to collect and make coronaviruses that are weaponized, that are more deadly?
So I, first of all, reject the implicit accusation in that question, and I do not have at my finger. I do not have at my fingertips the particular details of USAID.
Are you saying for certain? Are you saying for certain that no USAID money went to the Wuhan Institute of
I've answered
Virology?
the question. Go ahead.
No, please tell me. Are you stating that no USAID money went?
I am happy to take questions from those in this audience. I'm happy to answer them. I appreciate that they treat every person in this room, including myself, respectfully. I called on you. I'm now calling on someone else. Go ahead.
Do you hear how terrified that guy is? And then we hide behind this fake virtue of respect, that we must do something like this. Like, I'm going to get into what some of the weird dollar amounts are. I've got both the White House spokesperson, and we also have a senator talking about it. On the Republican side, they're calling out what these funds are spent on, and they're fairly incredible. And I think it's an audacious way to take our dollars and to use them. And it's hard to believe that they're real. These are all of the things that we've always thought were absurd about, like foreign aid. The lesbian basket weaving dance competition that's going on in Kenya, or whatever other made up weird, you're like, these can't be real. How can there actually be dollars assigned to this line item? We're going to get into a couple of those because they're being read out loud. And the fact of the matter is, either they are using them on things that are so absurd, they might as well be funding Canadians doing trips to the Smoky Mountains because they just want gay Canadians to be able to experience Tennessee. That would be a thing that actually wouldn't sound that crazy comparatively. Or they're using the money for something more nefarious, which is also a possibility. Speaking of spending, speaking of things that you need, there are obviously things that you need to spend money on. One of them is going to be a cell phone service. So if you guys are interested, we could talk about the folks over at Patriot Mobile right now. It's patriotmobile.com/KSS if you want to get there. All right. While we've won this election, the fight to restore the great nation is only beginning. You're seeing that right now with USAID. It's time to take a stand. Patriot Mobile is leading the charge as America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. Patriot Mobile offers a way to vote with your wallet. What a novel idea, spending money on things you want. Without compromising on quality or convenience, Patriot Mobile isn't just providing exceptional cell phone service, it's a call to action to defend our rights and our freedom, putting money where you want it instead of the things that you don't. With Patriot Mobile, you're going to get outstanding nationwide coverage because they operate on all 3 of the major networks. That makes it easy. If you have cell phone service right now, you can get cell phone service from Patriot Mobile. Period. And they have a coverage guarantee. There's a difference, though. Every dollar you spend supports the First Amendment and the Second Amendment, the sanctity of life, veterans and first responders. It's really easy. All you got to do is keep your number, keep your phone, or you can upgrade both or either. It's a 100% US-based customer service team. We'll give you the perfect solution. If you guys want to call them up, you could do that. Talk to them. It's 972-PATRIOT. Use the promo code KSS. Get yourself a free month of service. Right now, go to patriotmobile.com/KSS. Get that free month of service with promo code KSS. It's the only time that we use a different promo code because there's another Kyle out there. Apparently, we need to do a death match. Switch to Patriot Mobile, defend freedom, and use your dollars every single time you make a phone call or a text with the people that care about what we care about. Let's do a little bit more of this, this breakdown. Let me give you kind of a gaggle outside of the White House lawn. All right. This is where this money is. And I'm telling you, this is audacious stuff. Imagine if you were told when you write your check or you see that deduction from your paycheck on a W-2, this is what it's funding.
Through USAID over the past several years, these are some of the insane priorities that organization has been spending money on. $1.5 million to advance DEI in Serbia's workplaces, $70,000 for a production of a DEI musical in Ireland, $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia, $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. I don't know about you, but as an American taxpayer, I don't want my dollars going towards this crap, and I know the American people don't either, and that's exactly what Elon Musk has been tasked by President Trump to do, to get...
It's real simple. It's like, hey, what the hell are we spending our money on and what do we get for it? I'm looking at this thing here. Technical assistance is the training and the scholarships and construction and commodities, USAID contracts, procurements. They almost always use U.S. suppliers. So that's kind of the workaround to say, well, this is in the United States' best interest. We're going to take government money. We're going to go back and spend it with U.S. government contractors. And then we're going to export the thing that we spent it on to places to get what we want. Or maybe we're doing something really nefarious with it, like lesbian basket weaving in Kenya, or maybe we're doing a transgender opera in Latin America. Is that a thing that we really need? It's a 27-year-old gal who's standing out there just giving you the straight facts. It's not that crazy. How about an old white guy doing it? Apparently, we like diversity, so let's do a little bit of diversity. Let's go to the other end of the spectrum. We're going to talk about the competent white men at the end of this show, which is apparently a real problem for the political left. This is John Kennedy, who generally speaking, even though he speaks quite slowly, as they often do down in the South, particularly around the bayous, he's not making any sort of nonsensical statements. I can track this logic. It makes sense to me. If you run on doing accountability for money spent, then maybe you should do accountability for the tax dollars and how they're spent. Donald Trump's doing that. Here we go.
Now, President Trump ran for office saying, I'm going to review every single penny in the federal budget. Now, how are you going to review the spending in the federal budget without reviewing the spending? And that's what Mr. Musk is doing. Now, many of my Democratic colleagues and some of the tofu-eating wokarati at the USAID are screaming like they're part of a prison riot because they don't want us reviewing the spending. But that's all Mr. Musk is doing, and he's finding some pretty interesting stuff. To my friends who are upset, I would say with respect, call somebody who cares. They better get used to this. It's USAID today. It's going to be Department of Education tomorrow. And really, here's what's going on. For 4 years under President Biden, the people in charge ask one simple question. Who needs to pay more in taxes? Who needs to pay more in taxes? Well, that's not the question that the Republicans and President Trump are going to ask. Our question is, what the hell happened to the money?
This seems really straightforward. I mean, honestly, it's like every audit you would ever do, you'd expect to be audited. The fact of the matter is the government is fine failing an audit, not knowing where all the money went, and there's no accountability. Like nobody loses a job, nobody goes to prison. If that happened in a private corporation, you'd be shut down. Your investors would pull out. This is not like that complicated. It's very scary to Chuck Schumer. I'm just going to say this. From whatever Chuck Schumer is most afraid of, please, dear God, let it happen. You just heard the mention of the Department of Education. Trump has signed an order saying that they're going to dismantle it. Good. It's a constitutional crisis, though, if you're on the political left. Let me give you Chuck Schumer, who starts off the crying. And, you know, I don't think he understands how well this hits for people that are sitting on our side of the aisle. I'm over here listening to it going like, yeah, let's do that. Here we go.
I also know this is just the beginning. If DOGE attacks USAID today, then you can be sure they'll move on to another target tomorrow. Who knows? Maybe it'll be the Postal Service or the IRS or even the Social Security Administration. They could be next. Or maybe our national security agencies.
What? Stop teasing me. The old line is, don't threaten me with a good time. Chuck Schumer, did you say you might shut down the post office? An agency that we spend a ton of money on, that is pseudo-governmental, that operates outside of the rules for regular federal employees, and you know it doesn't actually financially make sense. Do you know that the federal government, when they send, this is funny, when the FBI wants to send evidence, they don't use the post office because it's not considered trustworthy. The FBI has a massive contract with FedEx. In fact, I used to send enormous boxes for like tens of thousands of dollars. We would insure $100,000 worth of equipment and send it across the country in 5 100+ pound Pelican cases. And we'd spend like $100 because the FBI moves so much equipment around that they use FedEx at such a high rate, and FedEx wants the government's business so badly that it basically charges almost nothing. I'm not even kidding. It was like $100 to send 500+ pounds insured over $100,000. That's real. They don't even trust their own post office. When I used to go into the nail room, which is what I called the mail room because there was a bunch of black ladies in there that would just paint their nails and not do any work. When I would go into the nail room at the Washington field office, it was FedEx envelopes that we had. There's no U.S. postal option. Even the federal government doesn't trust the post office. And how about the IRS? Didn't Trump say the IRS sucks and we should get rid of it and we should try to get rid of the amendments that have moved that as a real possibility? Like there's other ways to collect revenue. That's why he's been talking about tariffs. I think it's hilarious. He's trolling Chuck Schumer, and Chuck Schumer is basically saying, God forbid, we might go after the most hated places on the political right. But how many people are psyched about the IRS? Like, what person is going like, I love the IRS. They're my favorite. What I like to do is call and be put on hold indefinitely, have an obscure manual that may or may not land me in prison. There's all these like these meme jokes about it where somebody goes in and starts talking about it. And they're like, how much money do I owe? And they're like, you have to figure it out. And they're like, well, do you know how much it is? And they're like, yeah, well, can you tell me? No, you have to guess. If you get it wrong, though, it's gonna cost you. The system of the IRS is absurd. And here's Chuck Schumer talking about it. How about Marco Rubio? Marco Rubio just stepped into a role at the State Department, which runs USAID. It's an executive agency that falls underneath the U.S. State Department. The State Department is the administrator of it. So the Secretary of State would be losing like a real big power to be able to move money around and to make declarations and so on. Is Marco Rubio, the new Secretary of State, upset about losing this power? Here he is in a Fox News interview talking about it. It doesn't sound like he's upset about it. Kind of sounds like he's on the Team America here.
You're now the head of USAID. The head of DOGE, Elon Musk, called USAID a criminal organization and added that it is time for it to die. Do you agree with that?
They have basically evolved into an agency that believes that they're not even a U.S. government agency, that they are a global charity, that they take the taxpayer money and they spend it as a global charity, irrespective of whether it is in the national interest or not in the national interest. One of the most common complaints you will get if you go to embassies around the world from State Department officials and ambassadors and the like is USAID is not only not cooperative, they undermine the work that we're doing in that country. They are supporting programs that upset the host government for whom we're trying to work with on a broader scale and so forth. So they're completely unresponsive. They just don't consider that they work for the U.S. They just think they're a global entity and that their master is the globe and not the United States. And that's not what the statute says, and that's not sustainable.
Can it be reformed or does it need to die?
Well, that was always the goal, was to reform it. But now we have rank insubordination. Now we have basically an active effort where their basic attitude is we don't work for anyone. We work for ourselves. No agency of government can tell us what to do. So the president made me the acting administrator. I've delegated that power to someone who's there full time, and we're going to go through the same process at USAID as we're going through now at the State Department. I think there are this is not about getting rid of foreign aid. There are things that we do through USAID that we should continue to do. That makes sense. And we'll have to decide, is that better through the State Department or is that better through something, a reformed USAID? That's
real simple. There is an open rebellion amongst government employees who have this really strange idea that they actually do not, in fact, answer to the President of the United States. They work under the executive branch. But you've seen members of Congress push this forward as well. And that's, I think, where our major issue is. Here's a story that came out of NBC. Elon Musk and DOGE are hacking the government. Of course, they're taking advantage of the fact that there's computers that are involved. And they're saying he's moving with lightning speed to try to remake the federal government. Thank God for those of us that follow a news cycle that updates every minute. Do you realize only a few months ago, the guy who's sitting in the White House got shot in the head? And nobody talks about it every day. I was on a podcast last night discussing it. The stuff that happened in Butler. That could be national news every single day because it's so insane. And yet we've just moved the hell on. So moving at the speed of business and the news cycle is a welcome change compared to what government normally does. They usually just wait it out until nobody pays attention anymore, and then they just do what they were doing beforehand. It's very refreshing for people who actually want to see movement, who get bored of watching policies languish in committee and never go anywhere. Elon Musk is moving at a speed that these people don't like, and they're saying it's unlawful. And so you're seeing judges, lower judges, by the way, who actually don't have the authority as far as I can read it. And I have no idea why a president would cede authority to some appointed judge in some tiny jurisdiction somewhere that is in a lower court than the actual branch of government that is mentioned in the Constitution. This is my novel interpretation, and I don't know where it stands, but I don't think anybody could stop them, because the old idea is how are you going to sanction the U.S. president if you're the judiciary and you have zero mechanism of implementing it? The president doesn't need to recognize these lower courts. He can say, that's fine. Thank you for your opinion. I look forward to it getting up to the Supreme Court, who actually is a co-equal branch. You are not it. You have been established by Congress. You have been implemented by the judiciary, but you're not part of it. In fact, you got appointed by another president. So why don't you shut your mouth for a little bit until the adults get to it? It's like your teenagers disagreeing with what kind of Canadian trip you want to go on. They get a vote, but it doesn't matter. It's not a vote that anyone has to listen to because they don't have the power of an equal. My kids have a vote on what they're going to eat for dinner, and we may or may not oblige it. I feel the same way about these lower federal courts. They have no way to enforce it, as you guys are throwing out in the chat, of course. Andrew Jackson brought this up. This is not a new concept. They're very upset that Elon Musk has gone through and he's starting to fulfill the campaign promises. Also, they're saying he doesn't have a clearance. It's like the guy launches rockets into space. You think he's not cleared? You think he hasn't been read in on all kinds of stuff? He has unbelievable amounts of government contracts. I'm confident this guy is quite well cleared. In any case, this is a constitutional crisis, so saith people who don't understand the Constitution. This is Chris Murphy. He's a former colleague of Marco Rubio, and he's talking about whether or not Marco Rubio is acting in good faith. It's always telling when they get on and they start crying about things. He's saying a couple of the quiet parts out loud, so I want you to listen carefully to this clip. Again, this is Jake Tapper, CNN, and Chris Murphy.
Do you have a point, do you think, Senator, that money should be spent in a way that's not contradictory to American interests?
Well, listen, Marco Rubio knows better. He knows what he said isn't true. USAID doesn't spend money independently. They spend money based upon specific allocations of money to spend in advance of U.S. national security interests prescribed by Congress. So Congress writes a law that dictates how USAID spends money to make sure that we're countering Chinese influence inside Africa, to make sure that we don't lose access to critical mineral supplies, so that we're fighting back against Hezbollah in Lebanon, so that we're helping South American countries stop the flow of migrants to the United States. It is just not true, as Elon Musk and now, unfortunately, Marco Rubio are saying, that USAID has some independent mandate separate from how money is authorized to them from Congress.
Okay, got it. So what you're saying is all of those weird little pet projects that we just heard about, and there are plenty more of them. There's an endless well over the last couple decades, going back to the Bush era at least, of all the nonsense that you guys have been spending money on, transgender comic books and operas and places and putting, like I said, lesbian basket weaving theater on. If that is something that you have specifically mandated, I want you to run on that, Chris Murphy. I want you to go to your constituents and tell them that this is very vital to American interests, because I think we need to take money from your pocket and fund these ridiculously weird ideas that we have all over the globe and spread our religion of crazy. We need to make sure that we spread it because we are proselytizing the gospel of leftism. We don't believe in God. We only believe in man-made government and the United States government above all else. We want to go ahead and shove that down the throats of the entire world. Make sure you run on that and see how it plays. Here's somebody that's not from America. She is a naturalized citizen. She's been a beneficiary of being in this great country, and she thinks that we owe the world a debt of something because, she operates under this leftist principle that you should all feel guilty for who you are, where you were born, and what your money can do for your country. You owe it to the rest of the globe. This is Ilhan Omar, who is pretty detestable. And every time I hear her, I think, why does she speak that way? And then I go, oh yeah, because she's not from my country and she doesn't care about my country. She represents people from Somalia that actually still want to be Somalian, even though they live in a place like America, because Somalia is not even really a country. It's just a territory that hasn't had a functional government in decades. And that's because they can't handle it, not because it's our fault.
It is really, really a sad day in America. We are witnessing a constitutional crisis. We talked about Trump wanting to be a dictator on day one, and here we are. This is what the beginning of dictatorship looks like. When you gut the Constitution and you install yourself as the sole power, that is how dictators are made. What Trump and Elon and all of their cronies are trying to do is take away the constitutional power of Congress. We get to decide. We have the power of the purse. We get to decide where money is allocated, and it's the executive's power to make sure that that money gets to where it needs to get.
In the way that he chooses to do so. And he's going to just go ahead and put a little pause on the people that are administering it because he doesn't think it's being done correctly. Welcome to the Constitution. Do not lecture Americans on a document that is so capable that your country could never generate it. In fact, never has. They now have some sort of weird federal government out there for the last couple of years, I think like 2.5 years. And I've never heard anything about it because it doesn't matter. Somalia is irrelevant. So are all the people that came from it. They are irrelevant. She's irrelevant. The fact that she has a voice in Congress is actually a testimony to the great will of the American people and not to some sort of functionality of her intellect. Lecturing Americans on the Constitution, a document I'm fairly confident she actually hasn't read yet. Or if she has, she hasn't digested it in any meaningful way. Isn't it funny, though, when they go in this press conference and they start saying the quiet part out loud, which is to say that USAID funds, quote unquote, freedom fighters. You know, those people that are also known as revolutionaries, sometimes known as terrorists, depending on what side they're on. And almost always we get it wrong. The American intelligence apparatus has basically gotten every single color revolution wrong. It's temporarily helpful, or we think it will be, but we end up pushing in and something else pops out that's much worse. I don't know very many instances of foreign meddling that the United States has been involved in where it's worked out great for America. It continues to have these like negative dividends that continue to pay out. And I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because the people have conflicted interests. Maybe it's because they're just not that good at longitudinal studies of how their interventions are going to work. Either way, I'm fine with us doing nothing. That actually is a strategy when it comes to watching people that are not us in problems that are not ours handle themselves. If that means that there's a problem in Africa, so be it. That's what America First was supposed to be about. At least that's why I took it. Maybe you did as well. This is, again, Chris Murphy. He seems very invested in this. Is this what people who are from Connecticut really want? Do they go to Hartford where there's like gang violence every single night and they think, you know what I need? We need to send money overseas to make sure whatever Ilhan Omar's priorities are. A woman who lives in Minnesota and Washington, D.C. that came from Somalia and a failed state and is only interested in a Muslim constituency. We need that lady to be able to hand out all the money that we make and that we spend in taxes to stuff that has nothing to do with us.
The senator from Connecticut, Senator Chris Murphy.
Thanks, man. So, Elon Musk has been floating all sorts of awful, terrible conspiracy theories about what happens at USAID. Let's make it very clear that every single day, America is safer because of what happens at USAID. USAID fights terrorist groups all across this world, making sure that we address the underlying causes for a retreat to terrorism. USAID chases China all around the world, making sure that China doesn't monopolize contracts for critical minerals and port infrastructure all around the world. It supports freedom fighters everywhere in this world. Up until yesterday, delivering firewood, for instance, to the brave Ukrainian defenders on the Eastern Front.
It supports freedom fighters and gives firewood to people who are fighting. What about the hundreds of billions of dollars in military aid that we sent over there? Where did that go? Did that go into buying super yachts and mansions around Miami? Is that maybe in like Los Angeles that just got burned in the fires that we're going to now insure? Is that where the money went? Because I got some real questions. If you're in the world of buying firewood for troops that are in conflict in Ukraine, didn't you let the cat out of the bag? Isn't that like the lowest technology solution? And didn't we send an awful lot more money than what firewood? Is that what we got for I mean, that's probably right. Are they sending pallets of cash to light on fire and calling it wood? Scary stuff. A constitutional crisis. I found this article to be quite telling. I just find it fun when people want to go out there and say things like this. A constitutional crisis is something that comes from, what article is this? I think this is from ABC again. USAID freeze puts the Ukrainian wartime help for frontline evacuees in danger. Yeah, it's just nonstop. There it is. There's more of it. It's like, if you're not giving all of your money away to foreign nations that have done zero, do you remember how many people have stepped up to help Americans when there's a disaster in the United States? It's basically none. There's one that's coming forward. They're willing to do it for pay. We're going to cover that in just a second. The folks in El Salvador have been offering to take all of the illegal aliens that we want to deport, the worst of the worst, and put them in their Supermax prison, which is very interesting. It just tells me that they probably don't have the money to run their Supermax and they need to get on the U.S. government teat as well. So that's a possibility. But everybody wants you to send the money. Nobody is out there saying, hey, what do we get for this? What is the actual payoff to the average working Joe who's writing a check? I'm getting ready to write a check to the federal government. I'm not thrilled about it. It's a huge chunk of money. It's probably 2 months' pay that I have to write in a bulk sum because I work everything on a 1099. I would say they're working for tips. You guys say otherwise. But we're in a world where when you're writing that check out and you look down, you're thinking like, oh, am I getting like really good roads? Am I getting an FBI that serves my purposes? Am I getting, federal law enforcement and a military? No, you're getting like woke retard stuff going on. And we're going to be able to put a bunch of beds in a church and firewood in Ukraine. Seems like we're spending an awful lot more money than that. In any case, at least you guys should take the most important argument, which is that if you don't agree with this, you're a racist, having what they called competent white men. Let me see if I've got that slide up. Here it is. This is Darren Beattie. He just got put into the State Department, so this is kind of interesting. He's going to be the Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy. He runs Revolver News. We've had some interactions, mostly positive. I don't have a lot of feelings one way or another with Darren Beattie, but he got called out by, I think this is NBC, very, very upset because he said that it's time for competent white men to be in jobs. God forbid you say anything like that. That's very upsetting. And apparently he got removed from Trump's original White House in 1.0 because he attended some sort of a white nationalist rally. Again, when NBC News calls it a white nationalist rally, they are pretty much on the fringe of the sensible people. They are just on the edge of going onto the hard left, if not crossing over it. So they were really upset about it. He's also been pushing things about January 6th that are probably not true, unfortunately for him. He's called it the Fedsurrection. He's in the Julie Kelly camp. It's an unsophisticated take. I think it monetizes on an audience that doesn't care about the actual truth. They're mostly like interested in close enough. But he's not a dumb guy. He's upset the right people. And here's someone called Jasmine Crockett who's saying things about white men, mediocre white men. Meanwhile, does this woman have a place in America? Does she have a place anywhere else? She's actually not as dumb as she sounds, for whatever it's worth. We've played video of her not sounding like a complete ghetto hood rat dollar star Cardi B, but she actually acts like that, and she's playing to an audience. It tells me that there is, in fact, an audience, that there is a way to monetize this thing or to become a congressperson, which is what she's done. Here's dollar store Cardi B, Jasmine Crockett, representative from Dallas.
I am tired of the white tears. Listen, if you are competent, You are not concerned. When I walk into Congress every single day, you know why I don't feel a way and why you can't make me doubt who I am? Is because I know that I had to work 10 times as hard as they did just to get into the seat. When you look and you compare me to Marjorie Taylor Greene or me to Lauren Boebert, there is no comparison. And that is the life that we have always lived. So the only people that are crying are the mediocre white boys that have been beaten out by people that historically have had to work so much harder. This is why they don't want us to have education. This is why they are trying to literally say we won't fund the HBCUs, because they know that if they've already gone after affirmative action and they're saying, you know what, don't allow them to come into, say, these PWIs, as we call them, don't allow them to come into these institutions. We know why they created the HBCUs in the first place. It was because they wouldn't allow us into the white institutions. And so now they're not allowing us in. And now they're saying, you know what, we're also going to defund the HBCUs. You know why? Because they don't want any more Kamala Harrises. They don't.
No, we want all the Kamala Harrises, please. We want all the Jasmine Crockett's. You racist turds are the best. Continue, please. Run on racism. Run on lecturing white people that they are mediocre when, in fact, the entire country doesn't care about race anymore, except you. It's the only way that you got into office. You had to work harder. Trump funded HBCUs at a higher level than any president before that. I'm not a big Trump defender. I don't think we should be funding any schools with our federal dollars. I'm not interested. If you can afford college, great. If you can't, piss off. Go get a trade job. They actually pay better, and they're actually a lot more satisfying. Anybody who's ever worked with their hands and had to sit at a computer desk, working at a computer desk is pretty awful. Working with a shovel, even though it's much harder, is infinitely more satisfying, and it turns out most of the time now, it actually pays better because people need to do those jobs. We don't have robots out there building houses. This woman claimed that that her job was harder to get because of who she is. The evidence is stacked up in the contrary. That goes back to like my early high school days. That's a 30-year-old issue at least, and maybe before that. Affirmative action was always racist. And the fact that she was hired on because of the way she looks, and the fact that she's adopted this ghetto bullshit way of talking, because it is not real. That is not how Jasmine Crockett sounds. I mean, she probably does now. She's probably adopted that role and doesn't know how to get out of it. And that's a thing. But when you listen to her speak prior to being elected to Congress, before she got a national stage, she sounded like every other intelligent, articulate, educated person that you've ever listened to. She speaks in complete sentences. She actually doesn't even have that obnoxious like millennial/Gen Z uptalk thing, which is common in her age. But if you look at what MTG or Lauren Boebert or her have in common, they're all just fake mean girls that are pretending to be something so that they have a national audience of people that cheer them on and say slay queen. It's gross. I don't like any of that. I think it's all nasty. I'd like mature adult grown-ups to be in charge of things. Go figure. But that's kind of what we're working towards here. This guy's kind of a mature adult. He seems to say things that are sensible. We don't even have to agree. I disagree with almost everything that RFK says about government spending, about where we should put our money, about the fact that government is the solution to problems, when in fact it is probably the creator of the problem, and also getting rid of it would be the solution. But he's reasonable. He's articulate. And he cares about things that are the same values. At least he says he does. He cares about things like people being healthy and our kids having a future. That seems totally reasonable. I can have a reasonable discussion with people who are Democrats that are now working in the Trump administration because they're Democrats from 30, 40, 50 years ago. But the today Democrats that are trying to bring up the specter of racism, they're trying to relive the 1950s and the early 1960s. Time has passed. I think Americans are done with it. It's very weird. And those same people are applauding that the government is the solution, the same way that it's always been, in a very racially, in this like illogical way. They think that the solution to the problem is that the government is not even accountable to the people that it's supposed to be accountable to. There's a reason we have three branches of government. You're hearing them talk about constitutional crises. This is another one right here. This is the last one we'll touch on today. The names of FBI agents who investigated the Capitol riots are to be handed over to the Trump DOJ officials in a very lawful order. You're hearing crying and wailing about this because they think they are not accountable to the people that they are actually accountable to. The American people have a representative. It's called the President of the United States. It wasn't supposed to be that big of an office, but leftists made it such. Now they have to reap the whirlwind of creating a very strong executive. It's the opposite of what you want if you are in a republic. It's supposed to be that Article 1 defined Congress to be the primary branch among the equals. But people who wanted to implement policy and wanted things to go, when they wanted to move progressively to the left, they got it. Now you got Donald Trump controlling that desk. So if he wants the names of FBI agents who did something, it is a lawful order to say, hey, give records to the agency that you answer to, who answers to the President of the United States of America. Meanwhile, you've got guys like Andy McCabe, who actually got removed from that agency for lying and were reinstated under technicalities. It's the only reason why I would argue Donald Trump needs to be cautious about this, and the DOJ needs to be careful about what they do with it, because they'll be wasting a lot of our money and time if they go to the Supreme Court. But I don't think they should pay out. I think they should make every single person go the entire distance, the same way that me and my lawsuits are too. Because me and the Suspendables are currently involved in suing the FBI for the things that Andy McCabe is about to be crying about. None of these people showed up when it was about a coronavirus vaccine that we said no thank you to, because we have religious principles that, by the way, predate not just the FBI, but they actually predate this country. And in theory, the First Amendment protects them. Where was the constitutional crying over people who had their lives destroyed over illogical and unjust executive orders? 14043 is the one we're talking about here. Suddenly, we want to resist. It's because these people serve their own master, and that master is government as its own end. Here's Andy McCabe. I just have to put him on.
It's totally unprecedented. FBI rank and file agents and analysts who make up the vast majority of the field offices who do the work of investigating these cases, of executing search warrants, of executing arrest warrants, doing surveillance, electronic surveillance, whatever it might be. Those people are never touched by the political winds that blow through every 4 years, nor should they be. They, as you said, they don't pick their work. They're assigned to the work that they do. The work they do is lawful. It's within FBI policies, and not doing the work is not really an option for them.
That's false. Yes, it is. You can also object, and people do. And you could lose your job like Steve Friend did, and that was the right thing to do. So here's the deal. We know that this is nonsensical because some of the lawful work that you're supposed to do as an FBI agent is when they tell you to go work with ICE and go round up people, you should be doing that. And you're seeing that FBI agents within that agency are rejecting it. They're refusing to be part of it, and they don't want to take part in lawful orders to go do things that are part of federal law enforcement. And that brings us to this thing in El Salvador, which is kind of interesting. The projection of power. This is some of the stuff that America can use its money for, and one of them is getting El Salvador, who seems like they're probably running out of money running the super prison. El Salvador is offered to house U.S. violent criminals and deportees of any nationality in this unprecedented deal. Again, this is coming from, I think, ABC, who continued. No, this one's actually coming from CNN. So good job to CNN. Marco Rubio unveiled that they had a meeting with the Salvadorian president, and it resulted in a tour of several Central American countries and also an expanded regional support for Donald Trump's administrations and their immigration policies. In an extraordinary act of friendship to our country, like I said, I'm sure there's money involved, El Salvador has agreed in a most unprecedented and extraordinary migratory agreement anywhere in the world. They will begin accepting Salvadorian deportees who illegally entered the U.S. and also accept deportation of any illegal alien in the United States who has a criminal record from any nationality, whether they be MS-13, Tres de Agua, or house them in their jails, referring to two notorious transnational gangs that have members in both El Salvador and Venezuela. Like I say, I'm sure there's money. This is where your federal dollars should be going, is funding Supermax prisons so they don't run out. I'm going to show you an inside look that CNN did. This is actually a fascinating video. I'm not new to the idea that they have the Supermax. I am a little bit perplexed. I want you to look at the faces of the MS-13 guys that are standing in these jail cells. They have them in these blocks that are basically several dozen. There's up to 80 members in each one of these cells. There's no mattresses. They're simply like hard mesh, steel, toilet, bucket for water. It's very primitive conditions. They get basically 23 and a half hours a day where they're locked in. You're creating sociopaths right here. You're creating people that are not going to ever be able to be released. So I don't know what you do with these people. It does ask, like, it begs a question for me of like, what happens? Why do we want a bunch of military-age males consolidated and radicalized in a place 80 at a time? I don't know the answer to it either. I don't think it's like justifiable necessarily to go execute all these people, but what life are they going to have after this? Watch this little CNN video.
All right, we're going to go in here. Even as I'm stepping through these doors, I don't fully grasp what we're about to walk into. Suddenly, you're hit with the intense gaze of dozens locking onto you. These men described as the worst of the worst, tattooed with reminders of El Salvador's dark past. It's tense and uncomfortable, but here, officials say comfort isn't meant to exist.
There's no mattresses, there's no sheets. You've got a toilet over here for them to go to the bathroom. You've got this basin here that they use to bathe themselves. And then you can see there's a barrel of water that they can drink from.
Do you see those guys line up? I mean, that's military type formations, whether or not they're actually in a military. Obviously, they're not. But that doesn't look like you're building anything good there. How do you let those guys out ever again? There's no rehabilitation happening right there. They're basically holding on to them. And of course, the most effeminate man in the world working for CNN going to look at these dudes who are looking at him like he's a piece of raw meat. So that's not very great either. In any case, kind of crazy. The other thing is that we're hearing a lot about this opening that Donald Trump just did about a sovereign wealth fund. I actually want to play that real quickly for you as well, because they mentioned that the purpose of USAID was to go around and combat China and their economic interests. It sounds like Donald Trump has a different plan for doing that. I'm not well up on the sovereign wealth fund idea yet. I've been reading on it. I'm going to try to get an expert on to come talk about it a little bit further. But my instinct is it's a way to combat the Chinese sort of nationalized dollars or yen or whatever they're putting out into the world. The Chinese currencies that are going out there, and they're and I may have just got the currency wrong for China, but they're pushing to snap up interests that are economically viable for China and do investments that yield profits back for the home country. And so the United States has never had this, but this is not a concept that's brand new. It's a 20 plus year old idea. So I'd like to get somebody that has a little bit more experience in sort of like money moving around the globe and whether they think this is a good idea. My general instinct is that having more money wrapped up in the federal government is worse. So I'm not crazy about this, but you do have a couple of very smart guys, both people that are billionaires in their own right, standing next to Donald Trump talking about the sovereign wealth fund and that they're going to use it to try to basically leverage the buying power of the United States federal government and get equities that are actually going to return a profit, which in theory would be decent, except it just means more government. Again, Donald Trump, not a conservative. Everybody who wants to say otherwise, you guys are missing out on the thing. They want to use more government. So that's kind of where we should all be a little bit like, a little squeamish. Here he is talking about signing this executive order.
Next, this is an executive order. Discharges your Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, and your Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, to begin a process that will hopefully result in the creation of an American sovereign wealth fund.
It's a very exciting event. We're going to have a sovereign wealth fund, which we've never had. We have a lot of things that create wealth, and you're seeing that over the last 2 weeks. I think we've created more wealth. Other people have created de-wealth, the people, my predecessors. We're creating a lot of wealth. Scott, maybe you'd like to say something about it, and I'd ask also Howard to say something about it.
Yes, sir. This is very exciting. We're going to stand this thing up within the next 12 months. We're going to monetize the asset side of the U.S. balance sheet for the American people. We're going to put the assets to work, and I think it's going to be very exciting. We're going to study best practices that's done around the world. It'll be a combination of liquid assets, assets that we have in this country as we work to bring them out for the American people.
The extraordinary size and scale of the U.S. government and the business it does with companies should create value for American citizens. If we are going to buy 2 billion COVID vaccines, maybe we should have some warrants and some equity in these companies and have that grow for the help of the American people.
All right, so you're hearing them just kind of talk about they're going to basically leverage the buying power of the American government. From everything I can read about sovereign wealth funds, they want to generally be for countries that have limited debt. I guess it could be a way to leverage your actual money that you're spending and try to alleviate debt that way. It's kind of iffy. Like I said, getting more government money involved doesn't always make me happy. So I will get people who have a little bit more balanced perspective, who look at global finance and something that is, I look at personal finance. That's the best I'm willing to do. So most of you guys, but you heard that example. He's like, if we're going to buy 2 billion vaccines for COVID, and everybody in the room went like, oh, who wants to be doing that? Doesn't make me feel very good. In any case, so be it. That's the world. I actually just had a moment over the evening as I was kind of reflecting on things. We've been going back in time. We've been kind of doing a reflection on the time and where we stand today versus where we did a couple years ago. ago. This is something I wanted to throw up on the screen just to make you guys laugh a little bit. If you guys are listening to the podcast, this is a picture of Donald Trump riding on a tank carrying a 50 cal, and the tank is gilded with gold and explosions behind him and an American flag. This is one of the reasons why I got in trouble with Andy McCabe's FBI, because I had that hanging out on my desk when Donald Trump was not a political candidate. It was not a Hatch Act violation. It was just hanging out on my desk in a printed format. But it upset the libs that worked in my office. And here's another one. That's Ronald Reagan riding on top of a velociraptor, obviously some artist rendering, while he's got an RPG on his back, which I like to call a bazooka because it's funnier, carrying an American flag and shooting an Uzi. And both of those things were problematic to the current FBI and the folks that are running there that are now losing their minds, God forbid, that they're not allowed to do the good work and they don't want to expose the thing they've been doing on January 6th. Kind of funny. And then lastly, Phil Kennedy reminded me of this because I've kind of forgotten. At one point in time, Donald Trump Jr. Actually, Donald Trump Jr. did as well, but Donald Trump actually said thank you to Kyle Seraphin. There are many whistleblowers coming out and exposing what's taking place in the FBI and DOJ. Soon there'll be a flood. They are American heroes. The funny thing is that flood was pretty small, it turned out. And that flood is called the Suspendables. Most of you guys know who we are. But if you're not familiar with the story of Garrett O'Boyle, please check it out. It's in our channel. Go back into the old episodes if you're new here and find out about my friend Garrett. Steve Friend, who you will find every Friday on Friendly Fridays. Check into his story. Marcus Allen, who has been less covered because he wants to be. He wants to be a quieter guy. George Hill, also someone who's been prominent on this channel. And newly sort of public is my friend Phil Kennedy, who was the, he was the OG and let's say producer emeritus of this program. He got me to launch the Kyle Seraphin Show and named it as such, even though I didn't much like it. Anyway, this is kind of a funny little moment in time to go back and reflect on. I've got things to walk out the door with, and that thing is the most unhappy people on earth. You guys, as we consider who's screaming the loudest, I think you'll know who it is. It used to be liberal men were the saddest, as we showed on that stage for the DNC yesterday. It's changed. It's the other people that were on the stage. Enjoy our little palate cleanse. It's not good news, but at least we know it's true.
10 years ago, you wrote, conservative women seem to be particularly blissful. About 40% say they're very happy. That makes them slightly happier than conservative men and significantly happier than liberal women.
Yeah.
The unhappiest of all are liberal men. Only about a fifth consider themselves very happy.
That was true 10 years ago. Liberal women have overtaken liberal men as the unhappiest group. You find that particularly young women, very interesting new data show that white liberal women under 30 have almost a 6 in 10 chance of having been diagnosed with a mental illness in America today. It's a really big problem. And there's lots of speculation about what that has to do with politics, what has to do with race, what has to do with age, et cetera, et cetera. But what you find is that this is a group that's really, really struggling. And it's a pity because it's not good for them. It's not good for society. And that's what we see. So I don't think that being a political conservative is a panacea for being a happy person, but we see disproportionately these happiness and unhappiness effects in different parts of the population for sure.
Yeah.
10 years ago, you wrote conservative women.
Hey. The saddest ones are those people that Steve Friend refers to as the most miserable people on earth, or the worst people in America, the ones that would cut off their kids' genitals to impress their girlfriends. Anyhow, don't be that person. Go out there and share the Kyle Seraphin Show. Thanks for listening today. We really appreciate all of you. You can find us on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin if you want to see the video and watch us live. 0930 Eastern time. You can find us on X, where I've got that video from CNN today. If you want to go out there and catch all the articles, I always post them on KyleSeraphin.com, which is our locals community. And if you want to watch the video replay with no advertisements, if you're watching somewhere else and you're thinking, man, I'm sick of these ads, yeah, you can find it on Spotify, and you can go a cheat code to get there. You simply go to KyleSeraphinShow.com. I'll add that in later. Thanks so much for watching the program. I look forward to seeing you guys again tomorrow. Have a wonderful day. God bless America. God bless you. See you then.
Thanks for listening to the Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.